Hi, my name is Decal Quant, also known as Bowflex Barbie, and today I am doing a question and answer series. This is going to be the first part of my question and answer series. If you're watching this on YouTube, this will be the whole thing. If you're watching this on Instagram or TikTok, this will be part one. But I want to first share a little bit about myself, what I do, to give you some context for those of you who may not be too familiar with what it is that I do. I am a fitness professional. I do online coaching, in person training, group fitness, personal training, online programs, online challenges, and I'm also an IFBB figure pro. I recently earned my pro status this year, November of 2023, November 11th, actually, 11/11, here in Nassau, Bahamas, which is where I live. And I won it at the Caribbean Grand Prix. So this is my 8th year competing. I came really close to this so many times. And I just got 4 words: delayed but not denied. Yeah! I've been competing in the figure division since 2015. And I would say I aggressively and really intentionally started chasing my pro card in 2019. That's when I decided I was only going to compete in pro qualifying shows. But between 2015 and 2018, I would have been competing in local bodybuilding shows here in the Bahamas. I would have been traveling to different states to compete as well in both pro qualifying and non-pro qualifying shows. I really love the sport of bodybuilding. Fitness, as I told you, I'm a fitness professional, so fitness has been a part of my life for a really long time. I started working out when I was 14. I'm now 30, so that's a long time. You do the math. But fitness has really been an integral part of my life, honestly, a huge part of my lifestyle, and I credit fitness to saving my life. It got me through a really dark time. When I was 14, I lost my mom to breast cancer, and my brother and my dad asked me to tag along to the gym with them when I was 14, and the rest is history. It kind of is a profession that I like to say chose me. I didn't really choose, but I think it's, that painful place led me to my passion and helped me find my purpose in fitness. And through working out, before I even decided to start bodybuilding, I'd been in the gym for 7 years. So naturally, I had a pretty solid foundation. I grew up in a very athletic family, so they were very supportive of my decision to start competing. And yeah, I've had a really great run competitively, and almost after every show, but especially this year, I get a lot of questions about prep. What it takes to compete. People are always really intrigued by how my body and competitors' bodies transform. But bodybuilding is one of those sports that you don't really know about it unless you're in it or you follow it really closely, and you're really interested in. A lot of people that are just generally into fitness and health don't really have a great idea of bodybuilding. And just, I would say within the last maybe 5 years, people have really started sharing more of the, I guess, not so glamorous and like the behind the scenes of bodybuilding from a competitor standpoint. And so that's really what I'm doing today. I got a lot of questions after I turned pro about prep and about off-season or improvement season, as competitors like to call it, when you're not actively prepping for a show. I got a lot of questions about that, about next steps, and about the actual prep process. So that's what this series is going to dive into. So I actually have questions that some of my followers have sent me. Quite a bit of questions, so that's why this is probably going to be a multiple part series. But I'm going to try to answer them as best as possible. Obviously, this will be my perspective. Every bodybuilder's answer to these questions may not be the same, but I can only answer from my point of view and my perspective. I want to be as transparent with you and as honest with you. So that's why the little bit of backstory, hopefully gives you context into some of these answers to the questions that I have. Okay, so let's dive in. First question, and this is very mixed. I'm just answering them as I got them in. So if it feels like I'm answering the same question again, I'll try not to, but I'm just literally answering the questions that I received. First question is, how does prep and off season affect your mental health? That's such a loaded question, but I will say for me personally, I initially, when I started competing in 2015, it was a bit of a roller coaster for me. My mental health, I struggled a little bit in my very first 2 years, maybe, because if you're familiar with prep, we call that phase. So, prep, for those who don't know, prep is the period of getting ready, preparing for a bodybuilding competition. For most competitors, it's between 12 and 16 weeks. Some people go 12 to 20 something weeks. For me, my first year, I did like 21 or so weeks, but now I do about 16. Um, so in that prep period, your body really, you're dieting, you're training, you're very intentional about your regimen, very strict, and your body transforms between those weeks of starting prep and getting on stage. And then for me, my first few years, I would just wild out at the end of a prep. Like I would go and dive headfirst into all the foods that I couldn't eat during prep or that I was restricted from eating during prep. And for example, for most preps, I would lose between 25, 30 pounds. And after a show, especially my first 2 years, I could pack those back on in a couple weeks. So it kind of did play with my mind a lot the first few years because people are so like in awe of like this transformation and you're in awe of this transformation yourself. And then a few weeks later, it's like you look like you never stepped on stage. And so it can be a bit of a mind, a mental challenge. And I tell people you have to have a strong sense of self and you have to be intentional about bodybuilding as well to protect your mental health. And you have to kind of go into it knowing that you're not going to maintain your stage look and your prep look year round. So you have to find that comfortable balance of what your off season looks like and feels like and what your prep season looks like and feels like. And you have to find some happiness and some a good place in both. And thankfully for me now, I have, but that's also required me to be more intentional and more intentional about how I go into my off season and not just, diving into all the things that I couldn't have during prep. So for me, my mental health is pretty good now, but I did struggle with it. I would say my first few years of competing because I didn't have that one strong sense of self and I didn't have that plan going into my off season to make sure that I found that good place to be happy with my body in the different stages. All right, so next question. What products and supplements do you use? So I have a few now. Whey protein isolate pretty much stays in my regimen until I have to cut it out in prep. So I use that in prep and in off season for the most part. I use super greens when I'm in off season. When I'm in prep, I eat a lot of greens, so don't really need them. So that's super greens powder. I also use collagen. We know collagen is more of a beauty supplement, but it's also really great for your joints, your bones. I also use HMB. I have the real name on here, hydroxymethylbutyrate, but I think I pronounced that right. But it supports creatine, which I also take. So creatine helps you to increase strength, build muscle, and HMB, hydroxymethylbutyrate, helps you maintain your creatine gains. I also take vitamin C. When I'm in prep, I take a fat burner. I use Black Spider. And I've also done Liposide by Evogen as well. So those are my main supplements. I don't have a huge stack. Sometimes my coach will also add in like an electrolyte, which I have started using more regularly, especially if I'm not drinking a whole lot of water. But that's pretty much my supplement stack. HMB, creatine, protein, super greens, collagen, vitamin C, and then a fat burner for prep. All right, next question. How to not go crazy when you can eat the foods you normally don't eat while in prep. So I just touched on that. I used to be, my husband will tell you, I used to be like my first few years of competing, I would have all my junk food stashed like for after the show. I would have packs of Oreos. I would have all the different flavor Oreos. I would have chips. I would have Sour Patch Kids, all my favorite junk foods. I would have like a list of restaurants, especially if we were traveling, a list of restaurants that I wanted to go to after my show. I would just plan to like lose my mind for the next 48 hours and but then what happens was I would plan for 48 hours and that 48 hours turns into like 48 days. And then I'm feeling horrible. I don't like the way that I look. So, I mean, honestly, how to not go crazy is just to remember, for me now, is to remember how I felt after doing that, the times that I did. And, after a while, you kind of lose that I don't know, I don't want to say you lose that attachment to food, but what I tell myself, like the food is always going to be there. There's no rush to like dive into it. There are some things that I really enjoy, but I find that I lean more towards whole meals now. Like, so I'll have a nice burger or a sushi meal and then I'm good. I'll have a few snacks here and there, but I try to be intentional about timing it and like not having it back to back so that I give my body a chance to, and my digestive system a chance to figure out what's going on. Because to go from, eating fish and greens and rice for all of your meals for weeks and then going to eating junk, your digestive system is going to be thrown off. But I try to be intentional about that. Going into my off season, my coach does give me a reverse plan that allows me to increase my calories without adding a whole lot of body fat. That is the goal in off season. You want to be able to up your calories so that you're able to lift more, build quality muscle, maintain quality muscle, give yourself that mental break as well without sacrificing a whole lot of fat gain in the process. And so the best way to do that is to gradually increase the calories and give your body a chance to adapt and get back to its normal state, especially for us women who have, when we do change our diet so drastically from like a prep to now a reverse, you tend to have hormonal changes. I know for me, like my skin acts up, my gut health kind of goes up and down. So the best way to avoid that, which does not feel great, obviously, the best way to avoid that is to be intentional, have a plan. And even if you don't have a strict plan, like to eat intuitively and just kind of monitor how quickly you add a lot of the not so great things back into your diet without, because obviously you've been on prep and you've sacrificed for weeks and you've made this big accomplishment getting on stage. You want to celebrate, you want to enjoy, you want to indulge, but just doing it in a smart way and, being mindful of the portions and the frequency and, how much you have and how often you have it as well. So yeah, that's how you not go crazy. You remember how it felt when you went crazy and you try not to feel that way again. All right, next question. What are the pros of competing and going through a prep? And who, in my view, is eligible for competing? Who, in your view, is eligible for competing? So some of the pros for competing and prepping, obviously your body transforms. I think for me, I love a good challenge. And it's just awesome to see like what your body can do in a few weeks. Each prep for me is a bit different as well. And so learning new things about my body, learning new things about training, how my body responds, each prep is a bit different. So that's always exciting. Bodybuilding has also given me the opportunity to travel to really cool places, to meet a lot of amazing people. I've had a lot of career opportunities come up because of bodybuilding as well, and my connections that I've made through bodybuilding. I've met lifelong friends through bodybuilding. Had great experiences. So outside of the stage itself, and obviously everyone is competing to win, there's so much more in the sport of bodybuilding that I think is just awesome. And who can compete or who's eligible? There's no eligibility. There's no eligibility requirements. Honestly, if you decide you want to compete, there's nothing stopping anybody from signing up for a show. Now, being competitive in bodybuilding is another story. I think that genetically, there are some people that are made for bodybuilding. I think I am one of those people. Like I come from a very athletic family. I always had an athletic build. Before I even started competing, I was in the gym lifting weights for 7 years. So I think I had a solid foundation. And for me, that transition from just fitness as a lifestyle and being a trainer into becoming a bodybuilder was pretty seamless, and it made sense. So you'll find a lot of bodybuilders have a similar story to mine. Like they started off very athletic. A lot of them ran track, did gymnastics, had some sort of very athletic background, or genetically just were very blessed. But you also have a lot of bodybuilders that built their body. They didn't come from great genetics and they spent the time, put in the work, and became very competitive. But I think once you have the desire, you have the patience as well, because bodybuilding takes time to really get to a point where you're competitive. And for most people, it takes time, I would say. It takes time and it takes patience, a lot of consistency, a lot of persistence. So if you're willing to put in the work, then I would say, you're eligible. You're willing to be disciplined. It does take a lot out of you, and for a lot of people it takes a lot of sacrifice as well, not just time and energy and effort, but financial as well. It's not an inexpensive sport to compete in. So I would say do your research on the sport. There's a lot to know about it, so do your research, talk to competitors, especially if you know what division you want to do. Talk to competitors in that division and get their honest opinions about it, and their suggestions. Learn the ins and outs before you decide to dive in and say, I want to do a show. Let me just start prepping. Talk to different competitors, talk to different coaches, and, do your research. Next question is, how easy or difficult is it to transform and get competition ready? I would say most competitors will tell you it's not easy. And I think not necessarily that the training is hard or the diet is hard. I think it's mentally a lot on your plate, especially if you're someone that is balancing other things in your life. Like for me, I run a business. I'm also a wife. I'm also a stepmom. I'm also a dog mom. I I have a lot of different stuff going on. And this year, 2023. I launched a new company with my best friend. We have different projects like Bahamas Fit Fest and events that my husband and I had to execute. A lot of different things happening. Another business venture also came on stream this year. So a lot to manage, a lot to balance in addition to prep. And so for some competitors, that's being, like I said, being a parent, having a stressful work life, it could be so many different hats that competitors wear, and prep is just another layer or another facet of their life that they have to now navigate. So that adds the difficulty for sure. Prep takes a lot of energy. And so when you have all these different things going on in your life, now dedicating energy and time to prep can seem and feel very difficult as well, when you're balancing all these things with limited energy, because as you get into prep, a lot of times carbs become lower and lower, and your energy source is carbs. So you'll hear a lot of competitors talk about how they need carbs and like they miss carbs and they're excited for high carb days if they do carb cycling. It's because a lot of times we feel very depleted and drained at some points of prep, and you need that energy and that fuel from carbs that sometimes is very low. So I don't think anyone would tell you it's easy. I know for me, it's never easy. I have had preps where I felt like it went really smooth, or smoother than I expected. Like this year, prep wasn't necessarily easy, but it went by quickly. So it was difficult and it was still challenging, but I think time just flew this year. So that made it, I don't know, I guess a little more manageable for me, but I definitely would not call it easy. But it's definitely doable once you get a good rhythm and you get your footing and you get into that routine and you're able to navigate the different hats that you wear and like different things that you have going on in your life. Then that makes time management is big. Making sure you have enough rest, making sure you're on top of planning and preparation when it comes to training and it comes to food. That kind of makes your prep a lot smoother. But then you also are fighting. You can't go out to social outings and gatherings, and if you are a social person, you may be missing those things, milestones like birthdays and anniversaries. You're not able to celebrate to the fullest because you're on prep, and those things don't pause, right? So you can imagine like people that have kids, their kids' birthdays coming up, they have cake and they have cookies and all this stuff, and they can't like indulge with the guests at the party. So, or you're traveling and you can't like indulge in the native cuisine because you're on prep. So there's a lot of things that sometimes have to be put on pause because of prep, or not put on pause, but some things you can't fully enjoy because of prep in the moment. But those being in prep doesn't stop the things from happening around you. So you have to be strong, and sometimes that can be difficult. Next is, do you have target weight goals to add each week? I think this is a question about off season and if I'm supposed to be hitting a certain weight each week. Not necessarily. Bodybuilding, even for prep, is not so much about weight. There is a certain weight that I know, like I typically get down to for a stage, and so I use that as a guide, but it's not a like, oh, I have to hit it. And so same thing in off season. Like I said, the idea is to not sacrifice to maintain and build as much quality muscle as you can, without sacrificing or without putting on too much body fat. And so naturally, as you're increasing calories, you're going to, and you're building muscle, your weight is going to go up. But there's not necessarily like a certain amount of weight that I need to put on each week or that I need to stay within each week. As a woman, it's going to fluctuate from week to week. But the idea is obviously I don't want to step on the scale on Monday and then a week later or a couple of days later, I'm 10 pounds up. So, you kind of I do kind of monitor and watch how quickly I am. And because I know that obviously you're not going to build muscle in 7 days, not going to build 10 pounds of muscle in 7 days. So, likely that spike, if it is a spike that big, it's going to be a lot of water retention, sodium manipulation, that type of stuff. So just kind of monitoring my weight it's more so for accountability than it is like an actual goal. It's accountability as to staying on track with my nutrition and training and being mindful of how I'm eating, and what I'm doing in the off season. Next question is, how different is your diet in off season versus prep? So prep diet is very monotonous, like same protein, same carbs, same greens for weeks and weeks and weeks. The only thing that really changes in prep as far as diet is maybe the amounts, the macros, the amount of protein, carbs, and fats kind of dwindles as I get closer to stage. So, for example, in prep, my main proteins are fish, turkey, chicken. I usually do for carbs. I usually would do sweet potato and jasmine rice. For greens, this year I stuck to broccoli. Last year I did green beans, and a lot of the years before I did green beans. If you've been following me for a while, then I would blend my green beans and drink them. Yes, everyone would be like, "You are so nasty," but that is the easiest and quickest way to get that amount of green beans down. This year I actually got into roasted broccoli, so yeah, I enjoyed that. But that's pretty much the extent of what I would eat in prep. And then in off season, I can expand my proteins. Even though I typically don't. Those are the foods that I typically enjoy. I may add in some more turkey and a little bit of beef, a little bit of steak. And then I also have refeeds, or what people typically call cheat meals. I have access to those more often in off season. So those are just whatever I'm inspired to eat that day, which typically is like I said, sushi or a burger. I'm not like big on a whole lot of fried stuff. Every now and then I'll get wings. But it's not a regular thing for me. So that's the biggest difference. Off season, I eat more intuitively. I do still have macro goals, but the amount of protein, the amount of carbs, and the amount of fats is a bit higher than my prep. And the idea and the objective is to increase those throughout the off season, so that when I get in prep, I'm starting at a pretty high calorie amount, and then I'm cutting from there. So I usually get up to like over 2,000 calories a day for sure, which is also hard because I don't really be hungry enough to eat all those calories, but I have that option to eat up to that. And then when I get into prep, I'm cutting from that higher calorie amount opposed to, a lower, and getting into ridiculously low calorie amounts when I'm closer to stage. Next question. What do you eat? How do you work out? How do you plan for the next show? And what does being pro mean? So a lot of these I've answered already. What do I eat? I just answered. How do I work out? So I train 6 days a week in prep and out of prep. I train 6 days a week. For prep, my 6-day split is usually 2 days of legs, 2 days of back, 2 days of shoulders. Off season is pretty much the same. 2 days of legs, 2 days of back, 2 days of shoulders. And cardio in prep, I would do, I think at the most, I would do 2 35-minute sessions a day. In off season, I would only do maybe 4 20-minute sessions throughout the week. Yeah, so in prep, I got up to about an hour a day at the most, and that's towards the end, and that would be split into 2 sessions. But off season, I definitely don't do as much. It's just kind of to keep my heart healthy, and to help me maintain a healthy weight. But definitely not as much cardio in off season, as the focus is more on building muscle, maintaining muscle. How do I plan for the next show? So I do have a coach. My coach is Damien Segovia. He's based in Arizona. I have been working with Damien since I've been working with Damien since 2020. So this year will be my third year working with him. 2023 would be my third year working with Damien. I started working with him in the pandemic, actually. And so when it comes to planning my next show, I check with him and I send him my show ideas or things that I'm interested in. Or sometimes he'll send me shows that he thinks would be good for me to compete in. And that's really how I plan it. He gives me the green light. If I find a show, I consult with him. He gives me the green light. I add it to my calendar, or he sends me show options to see if it's feasible, and doable for me. And that's how we plan shows. And then the last part of that question, what does being pro mean? I'm not sure if this question was meant like, what does it mean to me personally, or like, what does it mean in the sport? So I'm going to answer both. To me personally, like I said in the intro, I've been chasing this goal since 2019, and so aggressively since 2019. And so after years of like working and coming so close, and then being disappointed a few times, I thought about throwing the towel in, and then I couldn't bring myself to do it. It's an accomplishment, and I think it's a testimony that when you really want something, you keep going. And there's a quote that I literally drove me through prep this year that said, and the last few years, that says, if you quit, it's a guarantee it's never going to happen. But if you keep going, there's a possibility that it will. And so that's what drove me the last few years, especially because I was so close to getting it so many times. And I felt like I was far away. And then, you just never know. Like it can be so deflating to put yourself and your body through so much work year after year and to not come out with what you expected or what you want. That you kind of start putting up this defense like, okay, maybe I shouldn't put myself through that again. Why would I want to do that to myself again? But for me, accomplishing the goal is just, it just feels good. And it feels, when I accepted my pro card, they asked me to say a few words, and I said, it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. And I just truly felt that I knew that I was made for the pro league. I just needed to trust that it was going to happen at the right time. And I feel like it did. And so from a technical standpoint, what does being pro mean? So before turning pro, I would have been an amateur competitor in the amateur IFBB league, which is considered NPC. So now that I've turned pro, I would now compete in the pro league against other pro competitors. The structure of the shows for pro athletes is a little bit different. It's typically less athletes in the entire show for pro shows, but the categories are now open, whereas in the amateur league, you would compete against competitors in your height class. And then all the height class winners would go up against each other to compete for overall. Versus in the pro league, it's just one division and everybody goes out, no matter how short, tall you are, everybody goes out on stage at the same time, and then they pick a winner from, top 5 from that lineup. So it's a bit different structure. Pro athletes also compete for cash. Top 3, I think, get cash at most shows. And the pro league also affords you the opportunity to qualify for Olympia, which is like the Olympics of bodybuilding. It's the highest level of the sport. And also being a pro athlete opens more opportunities for sponsorships and collabs. And, it's just it's a more prestigious league. It's pretty much the goal of a lot of amateur athletes that are competing to get to the pro league and then to get to Olympia. So being a pro athlete means that now you're able to compete for your ticket to the Olympia and to the Arnold as well. You're able to now apply to be invited to the Arnold. Next question. Is your diet flexible now that you're in off season? Does cardio go down? I did answer this already. Definitely a lot more flexible. Still very intentional. And yes, my cardio did go down. I only do cardio a few times a week versus every day when I'm in prep. Next question. Let's talk about the mental switch from prep to improvement season, food and nutrition, and body image wise. So we talked about the food and nutrition already. We talked about the mental switch a little bit, but I'll dive a little bit more. So the mental switch from prep to improvement season, and we'll talk about body image, because I scratched the surface in the intro a little bit, or in the first few questions. I would say you do have to find a place where, at least for me, I had to find a place where I was really comfortable with my off-season body, and I had to really just accept that I'm not someone that is gonna stay stage lean year round. I do not want to either. I actually really enjoy my off-season look. I still think I look very athletic. I still look very fit, and I love the lifestyle that comes along with it as well, and a little bit of freedom and flexibility. And so, just learning to enjoy and love my body through all the seasons has been my strategy for not going into a bad place mentally. Just knowing that, yes, I'm going to enjoy these few months, that I'm able to have the freedom and flexibility of my improvement season. I'm going to get stronger. I'm going to enjoy my workouts. I'm going to feel good. Still going to look great as well. And I'm not going to be as lean as I was on stage. And that's okay, because I know how to get back there. That's kind of what I tell myself. And when it's time to get back there, I will, and I'll enjoy that process a lot more. And it'll be a more meaningful process because I've had the time to enjoy the flexibility as well. All right, next question. When do you feel like you're at a normal, substantial weight? I'm going to combine this with the last question as well. When do you feel like you're at a normal, substantial weight, and how did you learn to love your off-season weight body? So I do kind of have a cap that I would let myself get to in off season. It's usually around 160, 162. My body kind of like caps out there, no matter how much I'm eating or like how much I change my frequency of training, which I still try to do 5 to 6 days in my off season of working out. Sometimes with scheduling, I give myself grace in off season a lot more to, if I don't get all 6 in or I don't get all 5 in, like it's not the end of the world. Versus prep, I'm a lot more hard on myself because I know that I'm training for this specific goal. But yeah, I would say 162 is usually around 160. 160 is where I start my preps. For context, my last stage weight was about 132. So yeah, quite a bit of weight in between the two. But that's over a 16-week prep that I would get down to that 132 for stage. I think my first show of this year, it was about 136, 138, somewhere around there. And then my last show, maybe 136. And then 132 was my final show. So, but like I said, I learned to not be so fixated on the scale. I focus a lot on how I feel in my clothes, how my body feels, how's my energy. It does help that my husband says he doesn't have a favorite look. He loves both, even though I feel like I know which one he likes more. Yeah, but he loves both. So that helps, from a confidence side as well, but also just remembering, like, I look in the mirror and I enjoy both looks. And so I won't say that I like one over the next, but I've learned to be comfortable in my body in both and appreciate that my body is able to go through all of these seasons and all of these changes and still be healthy, because that's a big thing. A lot of times bodybuilders compromise their health for a look, and I've never had to do that. I came really close one year, out of my own fault, diving headfirst into off season, going crazy with food. I did throw my hormones off really bad to the point where I had to go on medication. My energy was low. My joints were hurting. I got up to the heaviest I've ever been in my life, which was like 178 or something like that. And I was like, I'd never seen that in off season and so quickly after a show. But I had put my body through like 6 shows in 1 year. And then, so I prepped almost the whole year between like January and October. And then I went into eating like crap right after that. And my body did not love me for that. So my weight spiked. My hormones went crazy. My energy was low. And I had to get on medication for a few months to regulate my hormones. And when I tried to go back into prep after that, a couple months later, it was really, really rough that whole year. I feel like it took me almost a year to get back to a healthy place. Even though I was going through preps, my body didn't respond well. I didn't place well that year. It was a really rough year, but I learned from that, and I was like, I'm never going through that again. I want to learn to find a good balance between transitioning from prep to off season. And so that really drove me to figuring out what that healthy place looked like, what it felt like. And so now I have a area that I'm most comfortable, which is between 145, 150. But like I said, I've ended up preps at 160, 162, and I've still felt good. I just know that as I gradually put on weight, like that 145, 150 range is where I feel the most comfortable in my skin. I feel I still like the look and I like the way that I feel. But at 160, 162, I do as well. I just think that my energy is a little bit different and my workouts feel a little bit different at the higher weight. But it's really just, honestly, that's my journey and your journey to finding a comfortable place in off season or with added weight may be a bit different. But it really comes down to just, is going beyond the look and going beyond, the expectations of where you were or comparing yourself to where you were and just like, okay, how do I feel? How's my energy? Like non-scale related victories, as we say in the fitness space, what are the non-scale wins? And for me, being a bodybuilder, I always remind myself, like, what to do to get back to where you were. And so you're not trapped here if you don't like to be here, and you can always change where you are. There's a quote someone told me a while back: you're not a tree. If you don't like where you are, you can move. So you're not stuck. And just remember that, like, but don't be so fixated on the number on the scale. Like, look at the other areas of your fitness journey that you're winning and that you feel great about. Maybe you're stronger, maybe you have more energy, maybe you like the way your clothes are fitting more. Like for me, when I get like really deep in prep, I don't like the way that my clothes fit. I feel like everything's baggy. I can't fill out my jeans. Like that's not a great place for me. So I appreciate my off-season body because I'm able to feel better in my clothes, even though I'm not as lean or as shredded. Like I feel really good when I put on clothes still. So that's a non-scale win, right? I think that was the last question. I combined the last two. Yeah, hopefully I answered all the questions that I received so far. If you have additional questions, go ahead, drop them in the comments. I will maybe do another part to this or maybe respond in the comments with an answer. If you enjoyed this series, be sure to let me know in the comments as well. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you are a bodybuilder, give me your perspectives on some of these questions. Can you relate to some of them? Or even if you're just someone that maybe went through a transformation journey, maybe you're able to relate to some of this as well. Let me know in the comments. Let's have a conversation. And if you have ideas or topics you want me to touch on more from the bodybuilding standpoint or from a general fitness standpoint, let me know in the comments. Shoot me a message and let's chat. Until next time, I am Takel Quant, Bowflex Barbie. You can connect with me on social media at Bowflex Barbie on Instagram, at Bowflex.Barbie on TikTok, and at Bowflex Barbie Fit TV on YouTube. And until next time, stay strong.